The Case of the Vanishing Violin. In the heart of the bustling city of Harmonia, where cobblestone streets echoed with the melodies of street musicians, and the air was always thick with the scent of fresh pastries, there lived a peculiar detective named Inspector Felix Hopperton. Felix was no ordinary detective. He was a rabbit, though you'd hardly know it at first glance. He wore a trench coat, a deerstalker hat, and carried a magnifying glass in his pocket. His reputation for solving the unsolvable was unmatched, and his office above the bakery was always filled with the aroma of cinnamon and intrigue. One foggy morning, a frantic knock echoed through Felix's office. A young woman burst in, her face pale and her hands trembling. She introduced herself as Clara Melody, a violinist from the Harmonia Symphony Orchestra. "Inspector Hopperton, you must help me," she cried. "My violin, the Red Violin, it's gone, stolen. The performance is tonight, and without it, the entire concert will be ruined." Felix adjusted his hat and leaned forward, his long ears twitching with interest. "The Red Violin? Isn't that the priceless instrument rumoured to be cursed? Tell me everything, Miss Melody." Clara nodded, her voice shaking. "It's been in my family for generations. Last night I locked it in its case and left it in the orchestra's green room. When I returned this morning, the case was empty. The door was locked, the windows were shut, and there was no sign of forced entry. It's as if the violin simply vanished." Felix's nose twitched. "A locked room mystery. How intriguing. Lead me to the scene, Miss Melody." The orchestra hall was a grand building with towering ceilings and gilded walls. Felix examined the green room meticulously, his magnifying glass scanning every inch. The door's lock was untouched. The windows were bolted from the inside, and there were no hidden passages. The only clue was a faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. "Curious," Felix muttered. "Who else has access to this room?" "Only the orchestra members and the stage manager, Mr. Grubb," Clara replied. "But they've all been with the symphony for years. None of them would steal the violin." Felix's ears perked up. "Mr. Grubb, you say? Tell me about him." Clara hesitated. "Well, he's been acting strangely lately. He's always been a bit gruff, but recently he's been muttering about the violin being cursed. He even tried to convince me not to play it." Felix's eyes narrowed. "I think it's time we had a chat with Mr. Grubb." The stage manager was a burly man with a bushy moustache and a perpetual scowl. When Felix confronted him, Grubb's face turned red. "I didn't take the blasted violin," he snapped. "But I'll tell you this, that thing is bad news. Every owner of that violin has met with misfortune. I warned Clara, but she wouldn't listen." Felix's nose twitched again. "And yet, you were the last person seen near the green room last night. Isn't that right?" Grubb's eyes widened. I was just checking the locks. I didn't take it." Felix smiled faintly. "Perhaps not, but you know more than you're letting on." Back in the green room, Felix noticed something he'd missed before. A small, almost imperceptible scratch on the floor near the violin case. He knelt down and sniffed. The scent of lavender was stronger here. Following his nose, he traced the scent to a ventilation grate in the corner of the room. With a swift tug, the grate came loose, revealing a narrow passage. "Aha!" Felix exclaimed. "The violin didn't vanish. It was smuggled out." The passage led to a storage room beneath the stage. There, hidden under a pile of old props, was the Red Violin, its crimson wood gleaming in the dim light. But the thief was nowhere to be found. Felix returned the violin to Clara, who wept with relief. "But who stole it?" she asked. "Someone who wanted to protect you." Felix replied, "Mr. Grubb may not have taken it himself, but I suspect he hired someone to remove it, believing the curse would harm you. His intentions were misguided, but not malicious." Clara frowned. "What should I do?" "Play the violin tonight," Felix said with a wink, "and let the music speak for itself." That evening, the Harmonia Symphony Orchestra performed to a captivated audience. Clara's rendition on the Red Violin was breathtaking, and the curse was never mentioned again. As for Felix, he returned to his office, where the scent of cinnamon and the promise of another mystery awaited.